The Disrupt Education vlog can be found on YouTube. To hear it in podcast form, search Disrupt Education on any of the following podcast platforms: Anchor, Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, Breaker, CastBox, Overcast, Radio Public, Pocket Cast, Spotify, or Stitcher. Welcome to this episode of Disrupt Education. I'm Peter Hostrawser. I'm here with a guest, Dagmar Kauffman, who is just a changer of education. That's what I'm going to label you as right now.
So I take that.
Tell us a little bit about
change
who you
maker
are.
And thought leader. Yeah, I like that.
Yeah.
So I am. I got to this over my life journey, when I'm really passionate about human beings and about connection and communication and community. And what I've seen over the years is that we have created this very small little box in which we're trying to push everybody, even though at the same time we're saying, oh no, you go your route, but that's really not what is happening.
Yeah.
I've lived in Chicagoland for 20 years now, and what I've seen is that in districts like ours that are high achieving, the kids get very much pressured and pushed.
Right.
And there's very little room to follow your interests, because we have with all good intentions, we have created this path that is very narrowly defined, and our success is defined as college admission. And I'm not here to say I went to college, I went to graduate school, and that if that's your thing, that is a wonderful path to take. I'm not against any of that. I'm just saying there is a lot more that we could teach the kids and we could expose the kids to. And so then 2.5 years ago, because I just couldn't understand why nobody was doing really anything about it, because over the years I had worked a lot with social-emotional learning.
Yeah. Tell us about that path, like what led you to this, because that's very interesting.
I think so my background professionally is in higher education, research and policy analysis, and specifically in teacher education. Started out in Washington, D.C., had received a scholarship, and it was all about, from the German government. It's an association that is sponsored by the members are 350, 400 research universities, technical universities in Germany. And they're funded by states and by the federal government. And so the whole idea is that if you expose yourself to different people, you'll create more of a communication.
Right,
it's like similar to Fulbright, right? And Fulbright's motto, which is one of my big mottos, is that if you go abroad, you're going to change ideologies into human aspirations.
Totally. Yes. Yeah.
And so that was, that I came over here, and my whole thing was American Studies, where we study American culture. It's all about critical thinking. You have to take classes interdisciplinary, where you have maybe 5 or 6, I don't remember, core classes, and the rest you have to take in other graduate departments.
Oh, wow.
So you have to go in with people, like I went into journalism and sociology, and you're sitting there with people who have been socialized into their methods, into the way in which they view the world. And so then not having any of that background, so now you have to sit there and figure out, so how do you ask the questions about something that you don't even know what questions to ask, right? I mean, it is. I thought it was really awesome. And then for me, coming in anyway with a different set of rules and cultures and language, I was looking in from the outside to begin with. And then in the academic sphere, I was looking in from the outside again. So it's like 2 levels of looking in from the outside.
Wow.
And so
that's a great lens.
when I was in, I mean, it really is, because it really gets you to examine what is normal.
Right. Which is hard to define, right?
Normal is normal. Like in my household, with our kids, it was always normal is not normal is not normal. Normal is how you define normal.
I see. Yeah.
Because everybody defines their normal, of course, within legal limits and all of that. I'm not saying whatever. So then I thought I wanted to be a journalist, but I was really good with languages. I'm really organized. So there would all kinds of different things. So my parents always, promoted the strength, and we followed.
Yeah.
I had an internship in school.
Yeah.
I was in a hotel because I thought maybe, this is what I want to do, because there's languages, there's people.
Yeah, right.
And I had to run through all the departments. I was at the front desk. I was in the business department, purchasing, billing, everywhere. And I had to get myself there first thing in the morning, get up at like 5 o'clock, take the subway across town, go and do the whole thing. So get to practice all of these things. And so then when I needed a job, I wasn't making any money. So I saw, before, let me back up. I had, because I thought I maybe wanted to be a journalist. The internship coordinator at the University of Maryland kept saying, well, why don't you go to Annapolis to the State House, because it's legislation. That's an interest of mine at policy and policy in general. I'm like, that's a great idea, but I really want to be a journalist. Yeah. At least at the time, that's what I thought, because I love writing, and what a neat idea, trying to do this in English, you know. And so she finally, I was persistent enough, she finally got me an internship, and I ended up not on the news desk, but in the education department at USA Today.
Yeah.
And so there you can already tell how things go there, the way they're supposed to go without you even. And I thought, okay, this was cool. Again, I traveled all the way from Maryland up to Northern Virginia. At the time took an hour and a half to get there. And I was writing curriculum material for to go out to the schools with the paper.
Yes.
Right?
Okay. Yeah.
And so then when I was in graduate school, that I needed a job, and I found a writer researcher position at the American Association of Colleges for Teacher Ed. And so it was all about research and policy analysis, and particularly in the beginning, it was about recruiting minorities into the teaching profession. Right? And that was a long time ago, and we're still not near any. I mean, it was like 1983, a nation at risk. Yeah, right. And we have not.
Have our numbers gone down? I haven't looked at data. I don't
well,
know if
it's no, I haven't recently, but it's really interesting because I think there's a difference between the East Coast and the Midwest. Because when I first came here, we had been overseas, and I'd come here from an international school. Okay. Right? So there's like 45 different cultures, many languages, all kinds of different normals. And I arrive in DuPage County, and it's very different. It is not very. It's not very diverse, and the people thought it was very diverse because the neighbors across the street were from Texas, and that's interesting information to have, because to me, that's nowhere close to diverse. But but your normal is not normal. That is your normal. Right. And so then our district had created this multicultural education commission at the time, and so I went. I sort of invited myself, because I thought, I had written about recruitment, and so I'm like, this is awesome. It was very interesting because nobody really had a good idea of what they were talking about, and so and now it's after 20 years, we're going in the right direction, but you just see what has to happen in order for a person to learn, right? And it's not because somebody talks at you all the time. It's a wonderful example of how growth and social change happens. It gets thicker and more complicated, and we're wrestling more with it, and that is what we need to make sure that the kids understand. Right. We're wrestling, and there's nobody's fault or anything, because for a while I was really, before I decided that I was going to try to provide some of the answers in On-Balance Parenting. Right. Because I was wondering why nobody was doing anything about this, and then I thought, well, okay, then I'll do something about it. But the growth, right, that we have in terms of social change, or that is information that we gather as we grow and do more things. Right. And the kids, we're sort of telling them by the age of 17, you have to have all this in a package. And then, of course, they don't have it.
Right.
Because we have also actively stripped everything away. That could create an opportunity for practice, because it is all about practice.
What, and you can talk about unbalanced parenting or whatever, but what do you think would be maybe one or two big steps that we can do now to really start to change and get this ball rolling a little bit?
Right now, with the parents, I'm trying to work on, and to finish the question about, I think it started in 2nd grade when the psychologist invited me to join her advisory board.
Okay, yeah.
When my older one was in 2nd.
Right.
So when I look back at it, at the time I didn't know, but I think that's when it really started.
Was there a moment in that, in that
I don't
experience that was just like, wait a minute?
It was really interesting to see the issues and the problems and the ungrounding, the lack of grounding that I saw. And so that's why with Unbalanced Parenting, I am trying to support parents in sort of acting counterculturally, act according to their own set of values, and try to see if they can find their values, because the more you can understand what you are interested in, what gives you energy, what makes you flow, right? When you know that, then you can share that with your kids, and in all these, in the world of 100 million choices, then you can create more of a path that works for your family, for your kids. Try to support that. In terms of school, I think the mental health data that kids have at high achieving schools, if it were an infectious disease, we would be all over it. Because it is not okay. It is not okay for over a third of our kids in DuPage County being anxious and depressed. Right. It's and those are not the ones who show up with stomach aches or headaches. Those are the ones who feel sad or depressed for 2 weeks in a row, and that's the definition of clinical depression. And that's not okay. So, and we have all this data that IYS gives us, and when you look at school climate and caring and meaningful participation, it's awful. Everything that has to do with you feeling good in a place so you can actually do things and be interested in different things are not there.
It's interesting because sometimes you hear, I've seen it just in the news lately in a school around here where they're bringing dogs in and just to calm the kids down, but it seems like they're just putting a Band-Aid on the wound. They're not really, okay, well, we'll just treat the symptom. We're not really going to go to the disease.
And it takes courage, because the metrics are pushing on everybody, pushing on the kids, on the educators, on the system at large. But at what point are we going to say, okay, let's take a pause, let's breathe? And I have nothing against dogs or mindfulness. I'm a yoga practitioner. That is all good, but it is not a sustainable. We can just throw these Band-Aids out, because we need to change something systemically. And I think if we had some evidence-based research on student well-being and said, okay, and I'm working, like the proposal that I had for South by Southwest with Dr. Luthar, she actually does research. She's the leading researcher on students at high achieving schools. And she has a survey, which identifies the top 3 factors that for your school you need to be working on, right? Because she's all about, let's not throw out 15 things and then we create the same confusion and noise that we have with the IYS. Because everybody has their student data and their community data, but what do you do with that? How are you actually going to work with that? So that is wonderful, and I think just in my own experience, the more responsibility and trust you give the kids, the more they're going to respond to that. Because when you look at school climate data, I don't think we trust and respect the kids well enough.
I agree.
We can give them, they are trying to please us. They're trying to please their parents if we trust them. Because what we're doing, taking all these things away to clear the path so they can just do great in their classes, is taking away all the part in life that is really necessary for you to be successful in life. All the things that we call the soft skills, are really the hard skills.
Yeah, really. Yeah, and that I love the way you put that, because that's in you know, do you feel that this is part of the reason why there are less and less teachers coming in? I mean, I know that we can talk college costs, we can talk, you know, how much teachers are getting paid and such like that, but we know that, you know, people aren't coming into the industry anymore. There's huge shortages. Do you feel that that's
I
part
think
of
there's
it?
a lot of I think there's a lot of burnout,
Yeah.
and you are by yourself, right? I mean, you are in your classroom, and you have all these things that you have to run through. You have to run through the curriculum. You get paced by the department.
Yeah, right.
And I think mentorship, like I have a lot of friends at home who are teachers, and they take care of student teachers. They have to go for a whole year.
Yeah.
So you're responsible for a person for a whole year, but they also don't have to teach as much.
Right, yeah.
They have time special just to be with that person, and then they are in a cohort where there's more support, and the education is wider, the pay is better. Here, I mean, and it was when I was in teacher education research, it was they were burning out to 3 to 5 years, and it really hasn't changed. And you know, seriously, when you think about it, Peter, at 5 years, you're just at the point where you know sort of have an idea of what you're doing.
What's happening? Yes.
You know, in terms of classroom management, and then trying to get on top of the curriculum, you have to teach. So, I think if we started, plus we could do something at the same time. We look at the student well-being index, and then you look at maybe we run it more in block schedules. I find this schedule not only for the kids but the staff mind-numbing. Of course, when we change this block schedule, you have to teach differently. And of course, there's going to be resistance because people say, "Well, I've never done this before," and I get that. But if you have, you know, 2 hours of English on Tuesday and then again on 2 hours on Friday, you teach about time management. You have more room to think.
I've taught in both. Actually, I've taught in a 7-8 period day and a matter of fact, we were 10 period one time in a school, and then block scheduling. It was a full block, 8, you know, and the students were less stressed. You know, I know a lot of schools around here have got a modified block, which even, you know, takes some of the stress off. Well, let's go then to the parents, because here's something that I had just this morning. So we're in final exams right now. And one of my friends who's a colleague at another school and his daughter were in the car, and she said, "My daughter has a question for you." And literally it's like 7:30 in the morning. It's funny. And she asked, "Why do we have final exams?" And I was like, that's a good question, you know. So I gave her some data that, you know, it doesn't really help. And my only answer was it's status quo. It's what we've always done. And it's nothing to do with you. Just do the best you can, but don't worry about it too much. And it was come through with her dad was taking her to school, and I could see his values, right? So with what you do with the parents and building values, what are some of the suggestions of how to get parents to start to ask those questions? Because, and we'll put your website up because it's so much great information in there. You have a wonderful blog, podcasts on there, and such. But for a parent, like somebody who doesn't really know education, what are some things that you think?
I always encourage people to think much wider, zoom out, because all that academic achievement, and I'm not against academic achievement, but your kids are not going to be incredible at 150% on everything, because that's not, because you do that, you crush the soul. Because every kid is going to have interests, and so focus on that. You know, if somebody doesn't do any work and ends up failing classes, that's a different story. But zoom out and see the larger picture. A B in math or a C or even the occasional F is not going to. You're not going to die. You know, you're not. That doesn't mean you're not going to be successful. And this whole college thing, people have to understand that college is a business, and a lot of these factors that they use to rank colleges are completely useless information.
Right.
Or very little information.
Right.
Let me say that. But academic quality. How do you determine that? And I was at a presentation at a parent presentation the other day, and somebody asked that question, and I'm glad she did because it wasn't really part of the presentation. But 20% of the ranking is made up of academic quality, and the way in which they determine that is by sending out 4,000 surveys to university deans and presidents, and then they start ranking each other's university. There is no quantitative.
Yeah.
This is completely subjective. Or class sizes. Intuitively you might think, okay, that makes sense, perhaps.
Right.
Whether you have 100 or 10 kids in a class, but the way the colleges and the universities get around it is by having a cutoff, and then they send in the data to the college board, and then they're opening it up again. So when your kid gets there might be again 100.
Right.
But what is really, really important is how your kid is engaged, and it doesn't matter where they are, because you can be at this university that has all this prestige, and your kid just doesn't really know what to do and is lost. If there's something, I don't know, playing soccer or being in a band, or there is a club that they like, engineering club, doesn't matter.
Yeah.
Whatever gets them interested and excited to be there, that's what creates belonging. It's not the place.
Right.
We have also, I think we have like too much put on the same level that your character is determined by where you go to school.
It's branding.
It's great that I got a scholarship, but it was awesome. It was competitive. It was merit-based and all that. But that doesn't tell you anything about who I am as a person.
Right.
And what does count in life? What counts in business when you go anywhere? It's your person. How can you communicate? How flexible are you? All the things that our districts put out there as like the graduate profile.
Yeah.
And then you look at that, and then you look at what we're doing.
Right.
In the district I work in, there is that profile of a graduate piece that's coming, and there still is disconnect, and I feel like it's a move in the right direction.
Yeah.
But what do you think that students, and I'm particularly secondary ed, my wife is actually primary, so we have interesting conversations all the time. But what do you think is one way that a student in a high performing district that is just test score and college board, all this stuff, what other things would you suggest a student and or a parent kind of work on? Just
internships. I think internships and job shadowing, going someplace, and not taking a program to go and volunteer in Guatemala. And and that is nice. But there is so many organizations around that you can volunteer at and get excited about.
Yeah.
But it's hard. A lot of parents feel the pressure. A lot of parents, because everybody is, our districts love it when the College Board sends them a certificate. But it's not always about AP. And what I tell the parents that I work with, our older one was recommended for all these honors classes, and we had just barely moved here, and I looked at the guidance counselor and I said, it just doesn't make any sense.
Yeah.
Just because he gets good grades, because he just gets good grades because he listens and he can, it's easy. That doesn't mean that it's really interesting to him. There's a difference. Good grades does not mean good grades. Okay, you do your work, but that doesn't mean that you're necessarily interested in something.
That's a great point.
So if you want to go deep, then go deep in what is interesting to you. And even though, it didn't work out, because after European history, because there was so much stuff that had to be crammed in there, they never really had a conversation. My son said, this is for the birds, because this is no fun.
Yeah, right.
Because the conversation and the talking about it was fun to him, and that wasn't really happening. So he decided he wasn't gonna do it.
Yeah.
And again, that's what I tell the parents. It is your kid telling you what they like and don't like.
Right.
We don't get to tell them that they need to like this.
Right.
And it's really hard.
Like being a doctor.
It's really hard. It's really hard, especially when the kids are different, right?
Yeah.
It's one thing if your kid is very similar to you, but it becomes really challenging when their rhythm is completely different. But that's why part of the mission statement of Unbalanced Parenting is love your kids for who they are and not for who you want them to be.
Right, right.
So they can live to be the best expressions of themselves.
Mm-hmm.
One of the things I run into with a lot of students, and not necessarily my own right now, because he's still trying to figure out, okay, where do I fit in and stuff coming in as a freshman, which we're just like, take a bunch of electives, have some fun, don't worry about the cores, you'll get those. And he does school well, it seems very similar to your son, is time, right? So I've noticed there's a lot of parents that are doing, you got to be in a sport and you're in all these 3 different things, and the school day it's a long day for a kid, and then afterwards there could be a sport, they could be in a band or something like that. How do you find time to do an internship or some shadowing or
maybe in the summer, because I'm a big believer in and the kids tell us that they want time to be, because if we want creativity, if we want innovation, if we want adaptability, flexibility, we need to let the kids be, and they have been telling us we're just not listening. We need to give a lot less homework. Primary school, we don't need any homework. Middle school, maybe half an hour. There's a lot of research that backs this up. I'm not making this. Making this up. So we could do a lot less.
I'm just feeling it as a parent. Now I have a middle schooler she gets a lot of homework. And she struggles.
It's too much. We're working harder instead of smarter. Because I think there's a lot of fear in the system. The parents are afraid, the districts are afraid, everybody is afraid that we're not good enough. And so we're working harder and harder instead of saying, okay, maybe we need to work smarter.
Right.
So we need just somebody courageous enough to say, hold on a second. I met a superintendent the other day who has redone everything and just looking at student well-being, and so reprioritizing. Because when I served as PTA president at a very high achieving school in DuPage County, well, actually it's Will, I guess, a sophomore died by suicide 6 weeks into the term, right? And the PTA was really upset, so I ended up co-writing the social-emotional learning resolution for the Illinois State PTA. So it's been part of the legislative platform for 11 years now, right? And one of the research points is if you are doing well inside, you're going to be doing well out here.
Right.
And your academic achievement actually goes up 11%. So if we could if it's for those who are primarily interested in academic achievement, if that cannot give some support, that we really, with the latest PISA study, the United States is not in a good spot, and I think we have maxed out on this idea that life is just about achievement and a performance.
Right.
I think that's important, but maybe that's only like 25%, and the rest is we need to figure out who we are, and that's a process of life, what we're interested in. That is not something we can talk at somebody. We can give all these choices, right? But again, what I've always tell the parents I work with, there's many choices, but that's a blessing. That doesn't mean you have to do them all.
Right.
That's why it's called balanced. We really need to hone down on what is interesting. Are all these things interesting? Yeah, but you can't do 15 things.
Right.
You can, but we're seeing we're burning out, and we're seeing and there's never any space for quiet reflection, because playing for in elementary school, every time our kids show any kind of a blimp of interest in something, we stick them into organized organized sports or in a class, an art class. No. Because the parents are exhausted, the educators are exhausted, the kids are exhausted.
It's a great point, because I think one of the things that I see in the secondary level is students are unable to make decisions by that time, because we have made the decision so quickly for them. I see that all the time. I see kids freeze. And so we have to, in the business world where I work in business education, I have to reteach students, make the decision. And a lot of them are very fearful of, I'm going to make the wrong decision. I get some of it social, I don't want to look so, but then you make it a safe place. So that's where the social emotional learning comes in. Why has it taken so long and still not even close to social emotional learning? Why do you think?
Well, I think at first it probably was an unfunded mandate, and people didn't really understand in their hearts what this is about. Yeah. Because you can understand it intellectually, but that doesn't mean that you really have a connection to it and are going to actually end up doing something about it. So the last couple of years perhaps, and especially this past year, I've seen a lot of momentum towards that people understand that something has to happen, because we can't, the kids die by suicide. We have grief sessions, we have experts coming out telling us very good tips about what is going on. Right. But what are we actually doing? I was sitting at a session the other day, and a parent presentation where I was in the audience, and somebody says, it's really hard to get your kid out of an AP class when they have decided they don't want to be in there. Right. And then, of course, the counselors, with all good intentions, they say, well, you need a challenge. And yes, and I'm all on board for that. But do you need a challenge in 5 different things where so much homework is, because we can't, we tell the kids you have to manage your time, and that's all good and fine, but you can't manage 50 different things. Especially when nobody can manage 50 things really well, right? And they have so much growing to do. I think sometimes we forget that on top of everything else, they're making the biggest leap. In their physical, mental, and social.
In that time frame,
I mean, you have kids. All of a sudden, you turn around and they've grown this much. Right. It's like
I have to stop feeding them.
all the energy that goes into that. So I think the adults need to listen much better to the kids, because when kids tell you at the age of 12, I feel like I have to have a life plan, and I just want to be a kid.
Right.
That's really powerful. And we're...
It's upsetting as a parent to me, honestly. Like, what? Wait, what? Like,
exactly.
They're too young.
Yeah, and it's all about college. Why is it all about college? I mean, I think the parents, and of course there are parents who are very adamant that it is all about college, and it's all about the 5 or 6 professions that we think our kids can go into, which really makes no sense when you look at it. We don't even know what we're educating the kids for, right? But it's the doctors, the lawyers, the engineers, and that's just that's crippling. I mean, I was at one event where this young woman took her until sophomore year in college to tell her kids that her parents said she really wanted to be a writer and not not pre-med.
Right. Yeah.
I have a lot of students like that right now.
Just think about that. We have created chronic stress, Peter, to the extent that the National Academies of Sciences and Engineering and Medicine this summer classified kids at high-achieving schools at risk.
Wow.
On par with the kids who live in poverty, who are in foster care, whose parents are incarcerated. Think about that for a moment. If that doesn't give us pause, we can do things differently, and we can still, our kids are going to be successful, but we have to allow ourselves to think about success in a much wider definition. Because I remember meeting Dr. Bradley, yes, your teen is crazy, in 2005 at the National PTA Convention in Ohio. And I don't even know how I ended up, because a lot of the psychologists I had met didn't have any children, or it was just not very real what was talked about. And I went into his session, and it was so awesome, because he said, we want to parent towards what we think our kids should be the parents for our grandchildren. And that makes a lot, because that is like the zooming out, right? Can we take our gaze and look out into the future, because this here, at the end of the day, You know, because 50-year-olds who still go around and talk about where they went to college, I think we need to zoom out, because that is not, I mean, and I say this with loving kindness, because, you know, if that's really important, but that is not, that's not who you are, where you went to college.
Right.
And let's face it, most of the kids, when they apply to schools, it's not about where they went to school.
Right.
It is about having a college degree.
Right. Yeah.
You know, so we need to just create more path, and we need to talk about it in the schools. Often I find it disturbing that we don't actually talk about the traits.
Yeah.
You know, there's so many
People
different.
are afraid to ask questions.
Yep. I had a psychologist come up to me and ask me how she could find information on that.
Yeah. Wow.
You know, because I don't know what to do to fix my toilet or the furnace.
Yeah.
I want good people, and we need apprenticeships. I come from a place where we have really good apprenticeships. You go to school 6 weeks. I have actually a couple of friends who teach kids who are apprentices in political science and in English and metalwork, and they are on the job 6 weeks. They go to school 6 weeks, and you have a really solid.
What's interesting is you said apprenticeships, because what typically we think of an apprenticeship is you're going to be working with a plumber or something like that. You just said English, you said poli-sci.
Yep.
Like that's amazing. Like I think that's a huge step in the right
And then when
direction.
you're done, you know,
see it before you go
absolutely,
to the next level.
and you know, and the teachers talk to the people at work.
Yeah.
There's a constant feedback.
Yeah.
You know, the dental. My friend teaches dental hygienists and medical assistants, and so they get taught about the billing.
Yeah.
There's so much.
Yeah.
And that is, you know,
it seems common sense.
It really would be. It really would be. We're just. I think there's a lot of fear. We're afraid that we are not as good as the next person, and what we have created doing that is a lot of mental dis-ease, and that's why we're at where we are. You know, when the kids say, you know, 60-70% they don't do anything interesting in school.
Yeah. Right.
Or they don't get to participate. There's so much.
Yeah.
There's so much energy that we could harness, and after a while, you know, the educators, you would come along. It's just like everything else. Change is not easy, but I think where we're at, we need to do something differently, because what we are doing it's not a sustainable strategy. It's not viable, and a lot of kids in the middle are sort of getting lost. You know, when kids tell you, you know, 40% of the kids tell you, well, the teacher doesn't even know if I'm learning anything, because we're so, you know, focused on the metrics.
Yeah. Right.
Oh, it's amazing. So many good pieces. On
OnBalanceParenting.com.
Yes.
Is that where people
.org. OnBalanceParenting.org.
.org.
And we're on Facebook,
On
Balance Parenting, and on Twitter, Balance Parenting.
Awesome. I will put all that. We'll put all that up on there.
Yeah.
Thank you so much.
Thanks.
For
that
being
was
with
fun.
us today.
Yeah. Thank you very much. I appreciate
fantastic. Great advice. Please go to this site. I'll put all the information up underneath the podcast and the vlog. Just another great disruptor of education in a great way. Thank you so much. Until next time, ladies and gentlemen, we'll talk to you on Disrupt Education.